Hi, warm greetings to you all. Welcome back to Better Self Books, the channel where we share knowledge for holistic self-development through great books. There is a book like this, praised as a classic introduction to philosophy, unmatched by any other. It is very special in the sense that the author does not write in the dry style of most philosophy books, but instead weaves philosophical knowledge into a novel, making the reading experience more approachable and easier to understand. Up to now, this book has been translated into 56 languages, with global sales exceeding 300 million copies. Thanks to this work, the Norwegian novelist Jostein Gaarder was ranked among the top 10 authors in the world. That classic novel is Sophie's world, following the footsteps of the little girl Sophie in the novel. You will encounter thrilling detective-like stories, yet unexpectedly be led through the entire history of European philosophy. Right from the start, 14-year-old Sophie, after coming home from school, receives an anonymous letter. When she opens it, there are only 3 words inside. Who are you? Sophie blurts out, "Well, I am me." But soon she feels that this answer doesn't seem right. Just as she is puzzled, more anonymous letters arrive in the days that follow, guiding her backwards through time to ancient Greece, and she begins to seek explanations for herself through the lens of philosophy. From here, the great thinkers appear one after another, like shining stars in the sky, illuminating the path for generations of humanity. And in the end, the novel concludes with a surprising ending, which we will talk about later. But there is one deeply moving line at the end that I want to reveal to you now. When we gaze at the sky, in fact, we are seeking the path back to our true selves, and this is precisely the meaning of why we turn to philosophy. So, I invite you to listen to today's sharing, entitled Finding Yourself Again Through Philosophy in the classic novel Sophie's World, The Road Back to the Self. No thyself returning to the opening of the story. Sophie comes home from school and receives a mysterious letter. No sender, no stamp, just a slip of paper inside that reads, "Who are you?" Strange letters follow, one after another. Where does the world come from? Sophie grows increasingly curious. Who on earth is sending these letters? A few days later, the mysterious notes begin teaching her philosophy in a systematic way. The sender introduces himself as Alberto. Even stranger, Sophie finds a postcard in the garden written, "Dear Hild, you have turned 15 already. Happy birthday. Father hopes you understand that he wants to give you a gift that can help you grow. Please forgive him." He had to ask Sophie to deliver this card. That is the most convenient way. Signed, "Your father, who loves you forever." What is going on here? Sophie is bewildered, as she doesn't know anyone named Hild. Those seemingly ordinary spring afternoons, for this 14-year-old girl, are filled with the extraordinary. For the first time, Sophie encounters 3 questions that will change her entire world. Who are you? Where does the world come from? What is the meaning of life? Later, Sophie sees an inscription carved at the entrance of the Temple of Delphi. Know thyself. This is the famous saying of Socrates, the one who laid the foundations of Western philosophy, and also the guiding principle of his life. Socrates insisted that he was guided by a sacred inner voice. At the same time, conscience told him what was right. To know the good is to do the good. In other words, the ability to distinguish right from wrong and to act accordingly lies in true understanding. And that understanding comes from within you, not from the outside world. Therefore, when society is buzzing with voices telling you what you should do, don't be too quick to follow. Instead, pause, quiet yourself, and look deeply within. It is there that you will find the teacher Socrates always spoke of, not an external master, but the higher wisdom already present within you. That inner voice can help you know yourself, know who you are. Socrates spent his life walking the streets, not to teach a fixed doctrine, but to awaken people to question themselves. When admirers praised his wisdom, Socrates said, "I only know that I know nothing." When his enemies sentenced him to death and he could have appealed to be spared, he chose to face death calmly and with dignity. Before praise, he was unmoved. Facing insult, he did not argue, nor did he seek others' understanding. The expectations of others never swayed him, for Socrates remained loyal only to the truth he recognized within his soul. He believed that the value of a human life does not lie in pleasing others, but in being true to oneself. Professor Kuckleman once said, "Do not stop for even a minute in the love or hate of others. To depend too much on someone else's evaluation and approval, to live in the whirlwind of their expectations, will only blur your true self." life will grow increasingly exhausting. Only when you return within, stripping away external definitions, can you find the strength to live freely and peacefully. The road back to the self. Thinking of death one day, Sophie notices that the letters she receives have small holes and feel damp. Curious, she investigates and discovers that the messenger is actually a rabbit named Hermes. A few days later, while shopping with her mother, suddenly a silk scarf falls from the sky, embroidered with the name Hild. On another day, after school, when her mother is inside the house, Sophie decides to follow the rabbit Hermes. Tracing its steps, she passes through a forest to a small lake, and on the opposite shore stands a red house. Summoning her courage, Sophie climbs into a boat and rows across. As the boat reaches shore, she steps up to the house. The door is unlocked. She quickly realizes someone has been living there. There is a dog's food bowl and envelopes with her own name, Sophie. Clearly, this is the home of the mysterious letter sender. Inside the room, she finds a strange mirror. When Sophie looks into it, something terrifying happens. She clearly saw the girl in the mirror blinking on her own, and was utterly terrified. If the image in the mirror was herself, then how could it act before her eyes as if it were an independent being? In fact, this strange mirror was an allegory for Plato's theory of forms, the most famous disciple of Socrates. This philosophical theory holds that two worlds exist in parallel. The first is the world of appearances, the visible world we perceive with our senses, always changing and imperfect. The second is the world of forms, also called the world of ideas. This is the abstract, immutable and perfect realm grasped only through reason, where the eternal essences and ideas reside. The way the girl in the mirror blinked was as if she were in a parallel world, saying to Sophie, "I see you. I am here, on the other side." Immediately afterward, Sophie discovered a blue leather wallet, inside which was a photo of a blonde-haired girl, with the name Hild written underneath. Sophie thought, so this must be Hild. At that moment, the sound of a barking dog and approaching footsteps grew louder outside. Sophie hurriedly left, her heart filled with unease. Alberto had told her clearly not to ask about his identity, yet she had secretly entered his house. Back home, Sophie felt deeply guilty and wrote him a letter confessing everything. Alberto was not too angry, but he moved elsewhere and changed his mailbox. The journey of teaching philosophy to the girl, however, still continued. Through their letters, Sophie gradually came to understand medieval philosophy and the Renaissance spanning from the 5th to the 17th century. These were crucial turning points in the West. When philosophy entered the Middle Ages, the light of reason gradually dimmed. Theology rose to dominance, God was regarded as supreme, and humans were to kneel and serve him. But during the Renaissance, everything was brought back, with man placed at the center. From this emerged the term humanism. Works such as Don Quixote, the Book of the Courtier by Castiglione, Shakespeare's plays, and the Divine Comedy were masterpieces representative of this era. Immediately after, the strong liberation of humanity gave rise to the Reformation, marked by violent conflicts, and paved the way for natural science. Scientists like Galileo and Newton appeared in quick succession during the Renaissance. After that glorious period, Europe entered another brilliant age, the Baroque. The word Baroque originally referred to oddly shaped pearls, and so Baroque jewelry necklaces. Earrings was often very large, asymmetrical. This also became the defining feature of Baroque art: bold contrasts, dramatic effects, ostentation, and rich ornamentation. You may have noticed, Baroque paintings are extremely magnificent and splendid, yet in one corner there is often a skull. That came from philosophy. Life and death are two sides of the same coin. In this era, two Latin sayings were highly cherished: Carpe diem, seize the day, and memento mori, remember that you will die. Only when we deeply recognize death can we truly savor the flavor of life. Sophie learned new insights from the philosophy of this period and began to reflect on her own life. She remembered her late grandmother and suddenly understood the line from the letter: life is inherently sorrowful and solemn. We come into this beautiful world, meet each other, greet each other, and walk together for a short distance. Then we lose each other and suddenly vanish, just as we suddenly appeared in life. Human life is impermanent. Unions and separations are unpredictable, and each life is but a temporary lodging of the soul, while the body ultimately returns to the earth and sky. Yet many people have never faced this truth directly. They bind themselves to fleeting gains and losses, tormenting themselves in endless suffering. Matthew once said, only when we truly realize that we will die can we wholeheartedly dwell in the present moment. When you learn to value yourself, to release fears and calculations, and when you are deeply aware that death always lies ahead, then each breath and each moment of your present life suddenly becomes priceless. That awareness allows us to live peacefully in the present, to fully enjoy the gift that fate has granted. This is the most awakened and profound way of living a human life, the road to the self, balancing body and mind during the Baroque period. Two completely opposing philosophical tendencies coexisted: idealism and materialism. Idealism held that life itself possessed a noble quality. In contrast, materialism believed that all natural phenomena in life originated from bodily sensations. In the clashes and reconciliations of such ideas, human beings gradually changed. To this point, the value of nature and the value of the individual were reconsidered. People began to discuss why humans fall ill, and what is the best way to maintain good health. Whenever she felt sad, Sophie would often sit quietly in the garden, remembering her grandmother, who had spent her life sacrificing for her family, rarely caring for her own health. Only when she was gravely ill did she realize the importance of health. That was also the true image of many people in society today. For life, for family expectations and personal ambitions, they seem to be placed on a spinning wheel, constantly rushing forward. Only when the body sends out warning signals do they suddenly awaken. All trade-offs and exhaustion by sacrificing health are nothing but a reversal of root and branch. In history, Emperor Alexander, when facing death, left 3 last wishes. First, that his coffin be carried by physicians. Second, that the road to the cemetery be strewn with gold and jewels. Third, that his hands be placed outside the coffin. He wanted to remind everyone that no matter how skilled physicians are, they are powerless before death. A whole life spent pursuing wealth is nothing but wasted effort. Man comes into this world empty-handed and leaves it empty-handed. To use limited health in exchange for endless desires, that is the greatest illusion of human life. Several hundred years ago, Western philosophy had already affirmed that the best way to preserve health lies in the words balance. Philosophers realized that people fall ill because the body and the mind lose balance. The best way to restore balance begins with moderation in eating and drinking, maintaining harmony so that both body and mind can dwell in peace. This philosophy completely aligns with Eastern thought. The doctrine of the mean of Confucianism teaches one to keep oneself from bias and excess. Taoism emphasizes Wu Wei, following the natural way, which is the highest state of balance between man and the universe. And in traditional medicine, the theories of yin-yang and the 5 elements form the most complete system of dynamic equilibrium. A healthy body is a state where yin and yang are in harmony. Disease arises when they fall into imbalance. Balance is the capacity to adapt to the ceaseless changes of external conditions and inner emotions. We practice moderation in eating not to torture the body, but to avoid binding it to the heavy labor of endless digestion. We live in harmony, not to renounce all desires, but to understand the point of enough to know satisfaction with what we have, so that the heart is not disturbed by greed, anger, and delusion. The greatest enemy of balance is the bottomless pit of human greed and the fear of scarcity within each person. We eat much, we eat everything not because we are hungry, but because of boredom, social obligations, or to display ourselves. Many work not in order to live, but only to accumulate, and their anxieties are not for the present, but always directed towards some uncertain future. Thus, our body and mind fall into disorder, energy is drained, and the root of countless diseases arises. Therefore, the best way to preserve health does not lie in some miraculous pill. It begins with awareness. Awareness to listen to the voice of the body, to recognize when enough is enough, and to resolutely let go of harmful habits. To live in balance is the best way for a person to truly understand themselves, to cherish themselves, and to respect the natural order. It is also the path by which both body and mind return to their original state of peace. The place where you rediscover yourself, the road to the self, drawing closer to the Sulit, was also in this period that positivism emerged. Put simply, it is the method of understanding nature based on observation, experience, and experimentation. Next, the great figure to appear was Descartes, the father of modern philosophy. He is famous for the saying, "I think, therefore I am." Descartes initiated rationalism, placing reason as the foundation of knowledge instead of relying on experience. For many, he is also known through mathematics. for he was a brilliant mathematician, the founder of analytic geometry, and the inventor of the coordinate system, yet his philosophical achievements outshone even his mathematics. The questions that concerned him most throughout his life were, what knowledge can we be certain of? What is the relationship between body and soul? These remain topics of debate for more than 150 years after him. His philosophy also laid the groundwork for a series of other great philosophers such as Leibniz, Locke, and Spinoza. First to mention is Hobbes, the 17th century English philosopher and a materialist. He believed that all phenomena in nature, including humans and animals, were composed of particles of matter. Even human consciousness, or the soul, he argued, was nothing more than the result of microscopic movements within the brain. However, Leibniz held that the difference between matter and spirit lay in this: matter can be divided infinitely, like cutting a cake, but the soul cannot be divided, not even in half. So then, what exactly is the soul? Kant later said that time and space are like a pair of red glasses that limit how we perceive the world. That was his way of understanding the soul. Sophie found this too difficult to grasp, so she continued writing anonymous letters. Eventually, Alberto agreed to appear and teach her directly. He handed Sophie a pair of red glasses. Instantly, everything before her eyes was covered in red. But Alberto said, even if we see everything as red, we cannot conclude that the world itself is red. Often the truths most easily overlooked lie in the places our eyes do not reach. The answer about the soul is similar. The world we see, the world of phenomena, is one already filtered through the lenses of space, time, and human concepts, and therefore science can fully study it. But the true essence of the universe, what Kant called the thing in itself, forever lies beyond our capacity for knowledge. To come closer to the essence of the soul, and thereby closer to truth itself, one must dare to remove the colored glasses that obscure one's vision. To step beyond prejudice, limitation, and habitual thought, one might say, the body is the instrument, but the soul is the observer, the silent consciousness, standing behind all our experiences. Kant's view sparked a revolution, for he found a way to resolve the long conflict between idealism and materialism. Idealism and materialism do not cancel each other out. They always coexist. Therefore, on the path of returning to oneself and approaching the soul, the best way is not to let thought fall into the trap of absolutizing one side. Only by maintaining an open, integrative attitude can we truly understand the boundless richness of life and the meaning of existence. The road to the self, creating meaning for yourself and taking action on Alberto, no longer kept himself hidden. His teaching methods became even more fascinating. Sometimes teacher and student secretly entered a church at night to study. Sometimes they visited a villa across the city filled with antiques from the Middle Ages and the Renaissance. At times the lessons were indoors, at other times outdoors. And then, the philosophy class entered the Enlightenment, a brilliant age in the history of European thought. Concepts such as natural human rights and the separation of powers were born at this time. In the first half of the 18th century, the center of European philosophy was England. By the mid-18th century, it shifted to France. By the late 18th century, it moved to Germany. After the philosopher Kant, philosophy began to enter Romanticism. Literature of this period also exploded with works like The Hunchback of Notre Dame and The Count of Monte Cristo. In philosophy, one cannot fail to mention Hegel, one of the most important thinkers of idealism and the architect of dialectical idealism. After classical philosophy turned in a new direction, the grand, comprehensive systems of old no longer dominated. Instead, two important branches appeared: the philosophy of action and existential philosophy. A representative figure of the philosophy of action is Karl Marx. He once said, "Until now, philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it." This viewpoint marked a major turning point in the history of philosophy, opening a new path that enabled people not merely to analyze reality but to actively participate in liberating themselves. Next came an extremely important trend: existentialism. The core keyword of existentialism is existence, but existence does not simply mean that we live. Plants and animals also live. They exist objectively without needing to think about the meaning of their existence. Human beings are different. We are creatures who are aware of our own existence. A representative existentialist philosopher of this period is Jean-Paul Sartre. He affirmed that existence is more important than anything else. The fact that I exist matters more than who I am, even more than whether I live or die. That is why Sartre said, existence precedes essence. Hearing this, Sophie greatly admired this philosopher. Alberto then explained further, throughout the history of philosophy, philosophers have tried to understand human nature. But Sartre believed that humans have no fixed nature at all, that is, we are compelled to create the meaning of our own lives. Earlier we mentioned the metamorphosis. This work also bears a strong existentialist hue, a man who sacrifices his entire life for his family, living for others' expectations, finally turns into a giant insect. It sounds very pessimistic, but it is not nihilism. Existentialism emphasizes that human beings are free individuals, and it is precisely this freedom that compels us to make choices ceaselessly throughout our lives. What does this mean? It means there is no preset mold for humans to follow, no God or fate to lean on. We must take responsibility for our own existence and the meaning of our lives through an unending chain of choices. Therefore, we must be courageous, letting go of society's expectations and preset molds so that we can make purer choices. Choices that fit the deepest part of our soul. Only then can we truly be ourselves. The secret revealed in the long days that followed. During the course of her studies, Sophie continuously received postcards that Hild's father sent to Hild. What was even stranger, Hild's father seemed able to foresee everything Sophie was about to experience. From Sophie finding a 10 krona note on the road to her losing the necklace with the cross, almost as if all of Sophie's actions lay within Hild's father's sight. So who on earth was Hild's father? In confusion, Sophie told everything to her best friend Jostein, and the two decided to return to the wooden house by the lake to investigate further. This time, the two girls found many postcards sent to Hild. Strangest of all, on the last postcard Hild's father had written, "One day you will meet a girl named Sophie, so that the two of you will have the chance to get to know each other before you meet. I have also sent Sophie a copy of all the postcards I wrote to you. I think Sophie will soon catch up to you. At present, what she knows is not much more than what you do. Sophie also has a friend named Jostein. Perhaps Jostein will be of some help." Truly beyond imagination, even the name of Sophie's best friend appeared. And the postmark on the postcard was today's date, May 16th, 1990. Sophie and Jostein were terrified and bewildered. Why was the sending date today? How did the postcard get here? How could someone know exactly that today the two of them would come to the wooden house and see this postcard? None of these questions had an answer. But the secret was about to be revealed. On the day before Sophie's 15th birthday, the protagonist mentioned in the book suddenly changed. 14-year-old Sophie was suddenly replaced by Hild, who was about to turn 15. Hild also had blonde hair and blue eyes like Sophie. She stood before the mirror, looking at her face. This mirror always reminded Hild of her father. In the past, it had hung in his study. Hild's father was an officer, but he always longed to write things of meaning. The mirror was very old. Hild's great-grandmother had bought it from a Romani woman on her wedding day. Many years earlier, Hild's father had joked that it was a magic mirror that could make the image inside blink at the same time as the person. At this point, perhaps you have guessed that Hild's father is Alberto, the teacher who taught philosophy to Sophie, and that Sophie is in fact Hild. But why do they exist in parallel? Hild saw a birthday present on the table, something her father had prepared long ago. In his letter he had said that the gift would grow bigger and bigger. He also mentioned that Hild was about to meet a girl, and that the postcards sent to Sophie had also been sent to her. Hild sat on the bed and carefully removed the blue wrapping paper. Inside was a large folio. On the first page, in large handwritten letters, were the words, "Sophie's World." Hild's birthday present was the manuscript of a book. Unable to wait, she started reading at once. She read about Sophie's confusions, her astonishment upon discovering Hild, the details about the scarf, the coin, the cross necklace Sophie had lost, and the postcards Hild's father had left in the story. Hild suddenly understood everything and at the same time felt a pang of pity for Sophie. Surely Sophie still didn't understand what was happening. Meanwhile, Alberto and Sophie were standing by the window when they saw a small plane fly past, trailing a happy birthday banner even though the actual birthday would only be tomorrow. Alberto then taught Sophie a lesson about George Berkeley, one of the three great representatives of early modern empiricism. So what is empiricism? The philosopher Aristotle once said, "There is nothing in the mind that was not first in the senses," meaning all wisdom begins with sensory experience. This is the best explanation of empiricism. Berkeley believed that above humankind there is a spirit, and that this spirit may be the very source that brings us into being, like when we dream. In some parallel space there is another will or soul creating the dream and the world of our forms. All things exist thanks to that spirit. Spirit is the cause of all causes in the myriad things. This lesson helps Sophie fully grasp the secret. For Alberto and Sophie, the cause of all causes in the myriad things was Hild's father. Hild's father had played God, the one who created them. Hearing this, Sophie could no longer bear it. She dashed outside, plunging into the wind and rain. Tomorrow would be her birthday. On the eve of her 15th birthday, to discover that life is only a dream, what a bitter feeling. Hild's father had written this story simply to use a novel to teach philosophy to his daughter, Hild. Once Hild finished reading it, Sophie's mission would come to an end. This truth plunged Sophie into despair, but what could she do? One might think that every dream must end and make way for reality. But the ending here is an unexpected reversal. After learning the truth, Sophie and Alberto refused to remain characters arranged by another's hand. They decided to act to prove their own existence. This is precisely the spirit of existential philosophy. On her 15th birthday, Sophie held a party and even stood up to address everyone. Over the past few weeks, Sophie and I have carried out a large-scale philosophical inquiry. Today we would like to announce the result. We are living inside the mind of a certain major. At present, he is a United Nations observer in Lebanon and has written a book about us as a gift for his daughter. The girl's name is Hild. She has just turned 15 this year, on the same day as Sophie. Therefore, our existence is only an entertainment gift for Hild's birthday. The major created us and used us as material to teach his daughter philosophy. For example, that car parked outside the gate is in fact only an image the major imagined in his mind. Hearing such words that ran counter to common sense, no one could accept them. Some even argued back. But Alberto said, "When you discover you are merely a character in someone's dream, the wisest course, in my opinion, is silence, young friends." We study a short course on the history of philosophy like this to understand that toward the values of the previous generation, maintaining a critical attitude is extremely important. As I once taught Sophie, that is called Hegel's negative thinking. Philosophy does not stop at theory. It also has an action side. Listen carefully, this is the value of philosophy. When the time comes, we will perform a disappearance. In this way we can quietly slip out of the major's consciousness, amid the myriad difficulties then. Alberto continued to affirm that a true philosopher will never say never, so Sophie and Alberto went to the sea. They climbed into a boat, rowed with all their might, and vanished at the far end of the bay. They truly left Hild's book. The two sat on a grassy field in Norway, yet people could not see them at all. Sophie discovered that she and her teacher were like ghosts, unable to touch anything. Horrified, Alberto explained, "Sophie, this is the price we must pay. Because we escaped the book, we cannot possess the identities the author assigned. But we truly are here, and from now on we will never vanish again." Then they unexpectedly met Little Red Riding Hood. It turned out these characters, too, had escaped from books and lived in an eternal world. So do not worry. Anyone can find their own different way of existing. To have a life that is yours, that is the story that belongs to you. When we look up at the sky, in truth we are seeking the path back to our true selves. The book ends with a final philosophy lesson about the Big Bang, the origin of the universe, bringing us back to the prime philosophical question, where did I come from? According to the most reasonable explanation today, about 15 billion years ago, all the matter in the universe was concentrated in a very small region. Because of the extremely high density, along with gravity, the temperature rose to a terrifying level. Finally, an explosion occurred, the mass was blown apart. And that was the beginning of the universe and also the beginning of life. Therefore, when we look up at the sky, we are in fact seeking the way back to ourselves. In the past, Hild's father manipulated Sophie's world, but Sophie escaped and became an eternal entity. She then found herself and conversely, could even affect Hild's world and her father's. Once, when the Major and Hild were stargazing and he was explaining the Big Bang, Sophie raised a wrench and stood before them to draw their attention. But they could not see her. Sophie then tapped the wrench lightly on Hild's forehead and on her father's as well. Both cried out. For a moment, the two worlds seemed to touch, strangely intertwined. Have you ever had such a feeling in your life? Suddenly hearing a strange sound or sensing an invisible touch on your body? Don't be afraid, perhaps it is a sign telling you that, in a parallel world, you too are affecting someone. The ending reminds me of Jung Zhou's butterfly dream. Zhuangzi, sleeping, dreamed he had become a butterfly. Upon waking, he wondered in amazement, was it I who dreamed I was a butterfly, or the butterfly dreaming it was Zhuangzi? So who am I? Who is the true I? In the state of dreaming, human sensations can be as vivid as reality. Conversely, when we awaken, we take wakefulness as the real. But who can be sure that the reality of the present is not a long dream? The question from the beginning of the story echoes once more within me and is posed to you as well. Who are you? Perhaps each person will have their own answer, but the story's ending wants to remind us that the I we cling to is only a temporary state. The ego is not absolute reality. Therefore, we cannot rely only on what the eyes see and the ears hear. It is time to bravely return inward to find ourselves again. I hope you will soon find your own answer. I'll be here, waiting to hear your story and reflections. May you, on the path of finding yourself again, always choose wisely in each action, be true to your inner being, and walk forward with courage to the very end. Thank you for listening. If you found this video helpful, please share it with those who need it. Don't forget to give me a like, hit subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to catch the newest videos each week. Once again, thank you and see you in the next videos.